Okay, and I think it is just 5:30, is it? 5:29. We'll give it one more minute. We'll really start on time. All right, there we go. So, thank you, Susan Corbett. This is one of the public meetings that the Town of Mount Desert Broadband Committee has organized as part of our community engagement process. And so we've had a couple of meetings so far. This is our third one, and the topic is digital equity. And so we have invited Susan Corbett here to join us and talk about this important topic. And I want to give a little bio. Susan and I met a long time ago in the early 2000s on very different matters. I was working for a different nonprofit in the field of substance abuse and looking into people in the Down East region of note. And I heard about Susan Corbett and her business. Is it Jonesport or Jonesboro where you started your business?
Jonesport.
In Jonesport. So moving up from Massachusetts to do a home-based in Jonesport business of medical record keeping or medical transcription, and not finding enough broadband services to make that happen. And so created a business that became Axiom Technologies to install broadband all over Washington County and beyond. And it's such I think, a Yankee spirit of, if you have to do it, if you need something, sometimes you have to do it yourself. And that's how this wonderful company got started and built networks all over the place. I think closest to our town, all of Cranberry Islands now has fabulous fiber optic cable all over Cranberry Islands, thanks to Axiom Technologies putting that in. And I think lots of other communities around the state are doing the same thing. So then years later, after running a successful business, Susan steps back, somebody else comes in to take the lead so that she can move over to create the National Digital Equity Center based in Machias, Maine, of all places. So we're dying to hear more of this. And Susan also is on the board of the Connect Maine Authority and was on the state commissions that were looking at economic revitalization in light of COVID and how do we pivot to stick to the state strategic plan. And so has been a real key person in a lot of what's going on in the state. And we all know that broadband is one of the key ingredients to a successful economy for the state, and that digital equity is an important part of that. So thank you, Susan, for joining us today.
Well, I am so happy to be here, and I'm always excited when I'm talking to a broadband committee on the local level. It just tells me how important the issue is for you and that you're all volunteering your time to try to make a difference in your community. So congratulations to all of you. I am on the Connect Maine Authority, and you've probably heard that there is a new organization or agency called the Maine Connectivity Authority. That is, the governor has created that in order to facilitate the $300 million or so that is due to come into the state. So there's so I have so in the work that I've done in infrastructure, digital equity has always ridden alongside of that. So back in the early years in 2009 or 10, 11, we received Axiom as a for-profit company received a BTOP grant. So the same funding that built out the 3-ring binder, that middle mile fiber project that occurred around the state. And we did a project on sustainable broadband adoption where we worked with farmers and fishermen and taught them how to use technology to use with their natural resource-based businesses. We also did a project at the same time with the College of Nursing and Health Professions in Lewiston, Maine, and connected them to Down East Community Hospital and did a pilot project on distance learning and trained 2 cohorts of RNs that are today providing much needed services in Down East Maine. So we've always had an eye towards digital literacy, digital inclusion, digital equity, and long before these were even words and a part of our vocabulary. In 2018, I stepped down as CEO of Axiom and I founded the National Digital Equity Center with a goal of closing the digital divide here in Maine and across the United States. To date, we've raised just over $4 million to provide free digital literacy to all of Maine residents. And so that's where I'm coming from today. I believe that all infrastructure plans on the community level should also have a digital equity and digital inclusion plan. Kathy had a list of questions that she wanted me to address today, and I thought it actually could be addressed in just talking about how do you build a digital equity plan for your community. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen. That's okay. And all right, y'all can see this?
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay. So what are we even talking about when we're talking about digital equity? So digital equity is a condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. I think what the pandemic showed is how deep the digital divide was throughout the state. Not only was there a lack of broadband or not enough broadband, but also people needed to learn the skills in order to become remote workers, participate in online school, to do telehealth visit and connect with their providers. We know that digital equity is necessary for civic and cultural participation, employment, lifelong learning, and access to essential services. We achieve digital equity by doing digital inclusion. And digital inclusion includes affordable broadband, affordable equipment, digital literacy training, and public computer access. Well, I guess we can put this to real full slide. Hang on a second. There we go. All right, that's better. You can all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. A digital equity and digital inclusion plan for our community includes a plan of how are you addressing affordable broadband? What's your plan for affordable equipment? How are you going to provide digital literacy to your citizens? Is there public computer access? Are there community advocates? All of you are community advocates. And what's the broadband adoption rate in your community? When we're talking about affordable broadband, is there a plan for low to moderate income families that cannot afford an internet connection? It's really important to look at the demographics of your community and to really understand how many low income families that are in your community and what is the plan. We have on the federal level, you may have heard about the emergency broadband plan. That's a subsidy. Right now, it's $50 per month for income eligible families to offset broadband costs. In the American Rescue Plan, that plan, the emergency broadband plan is going to continue, but it will only be at $30 per month. So that is one way to promote that for the families within your community, and to know which broadband providers are qualified to offer that discount. If there's not, that's one way of tackling affordable broadband. The other is that is there perhaps some type of fund that you can use to help offset broadband? Maybe it's for families with children in school and they need to have internet in order to do homework every day. Maybe it's going to be for your older adults that are living alone and it would benefit from having a broadband connection to connect to family, friends, and healthcare providers. Has the community identified who needs equipment? At the National Digital Equity Center, we have a plan and we have funding from the Maine Office of Community Development to provide desktops, laptops, tablets to low to moderate income individuals. We have a certain amount of money. When that money runs out, it runs out. So it may be something that the community might want to identify. Who needs equipment? What's holding somebody back from participating in our digital economy? And then digital literacy. So what we found with the pandemic is that prior to the pandemic, we found that our classes were a high number of our students were unemployed, had a educational attainment of high school equivalency or less, had family median income of 34.9 or less. Post-pandemic, we actually saw that our students, the demographics changed. We were seeing more students that had a higher educational attainment with college degrees or higher per family capita income. And what that told us is that these were skills that were needed in order to participate in a remote workforce. We know that technology is changing all the time. I often get asked, how long do we need to do digital literacy? Probably forever, because there's all of these new apps, new programs that we're learning all the time. If you look at your own use of technology and how it's evolved and changed over the last 5 or 10 or 20 years, it's been pretty significant. Most of us have learned because we've said, hey, Kathy, how did you do that? And so having classes available for folks is a really important piece of your digital equity and digital inclusion plan. We typically will do, when we're working with a community, we suggest doing a survey to your community. This is a survey results from Maine West, down in the western part of the state. We did a survey and asked about what type of classes would you benefit from. And so this is just an example of how people respond, of what they want to learn on the internet. When you're doing your digital equity and digital inclusion plan, finding out where there's public Wi-Fi. Are there places like libraries and adult education locations that have computers available for public use? We know that there are like places like McDonald's and coffee shops and other places have free Wi-Fi. So knowing where there's Wi-Fi available is a great way to promote broadband, and for people who don't have an internet connection at home or don't have equipment, where can they go that they can have access to the internet and equipment to use? Are there community volunteers that can promote your digital inclusion efforts? Your committee is a great resource for making sure that as you're building your broadband plan for infrastructure and getting in your quest to get better broadband for your community, that you're also advocating for digital inclusion efforts. So we hear, there's a lot of different buzzwords that we hear in digital equity, digital inclusion, broadband adoption, take rate. So take rate means that if your community did have broadband available, that of 100 homes that broadband service might pass, only 75% will actually take it, will subscribe to broadband. The reason that they don't subscribe to broadband, the number one reason is affordability, and the number two reason is lack of equipment or lack of digital skills. In the broadband adoption statistics, which the American Community Survey does surveys for folks every so many years to find out whether they have broadband at home, whether they have equipment. So when they're talking about broadband adoption, they're talking about take rate and do homes have a computer. I ran the statistics for Mount Desert. So there's according to the American Community Survey, there's about 825 households. 749 of your households have a computer, and only 681 have a broadband subscription. Now, that doesn't mean that those 681 have a good broadband subscription. They just have a subscription. The National Digital Equity Center has lots of resources. All of our classes are free. We mostly do them as online interactive classes. There are typically about 10 students in a class. It's not unusual for the students to have a relationship with the instructor so that they'll continue to ask questions and reach out to the instructor as they need to. As I mentioned before, we now have some free devices for low to moderate income individuals. They have to meet the income eligibility guidelines. If they, for the laptops and the desktops, if they take 5 hours of classes, which includes internet safety, we will give them a certificate of ownership for that piece of equipment. We have a partner on-site program. We do this with organizations that might be an adult ed or a library where they have a group of people at their location, and we bring the instructor in over Zoom. For partner on-site programs, that's a good way for them to earn acquiring a computer, desktop, or laptop for their program. It's sort of the reward. If you work with us, we'll give you some equipment to keep for yourself or for your program. We also have a volunteer program. We teach volunteers how to be tutors. And so that's been really helpful for organizations. We piloted that with the Southern Maine Area on Aging. They had volunteers that were going out and visiting folks, and the pandemic happened. They couldn't do that. So we got tablets in the hands of those volunteers, taught them how to use it, gave their clients tablets and connected them. And it's been a great example of a good volunteer program. We have lots of information on our website, and feel free to log on to that. And of course, you can always reach out to us at any time. I'm going to stop share. There was a lot of information that I just gave you. And so I'd love to open it up for questions or comments or anything that sort of just jumped out at you that you might want some more information on.
Susan, first I'll ask if you would share that slide deck with me. That would be helpful. Thank you.
I'd be happy to do that.
Great. And I wonder, how do you fund all of your activities?
So we've been very lucky. We've been fundraising. I've been fundraising since 2018. About $1.5 million came from U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration. The State of Maine Office of Community Development gave us some funds for those devices for folks. We are funded by private philanthropy. There's some program income that comes in. Under the American Rescue Plan and under the infrastructure, there's actually, for the broadband piece that is in both of those bills, there's we can use some of that money for digital equity and digital inclusion. The state of Maine will have to decide how they want to do that and how much they want to set aside. I believe that all infrastructure on the Connect Maine side, what I would like to see is all infrastructure grants, that there's a set aside to do a digital equity and digital inclusion plan and to support those efforts. So we'll see as this sort of rolls out over the next several months. The governor is a very big proponent on affordability. So I'll venture to guess that that's going to be built in under the Maine Connectivity Authority of addressing the affordability piece of it, as well as the rest of the digital inclusion efforts.
I'd be curious about what was it, the Connect Maine Authority? The planning for the $300+ million coming from the feds. How far along has that planning process been?
So, did I just lose you? Oh,
no, I'm right.
Okay, hang on. Okay, hang on. I just lost you here. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. So the first group of funding is $150 million. About 130 million. Well, there's 100. So 15 million came from the bond that we all voted on last July. So there's 15 million there. There's money in a line item that the governor put in the budget. And then there's the money that's coming from the American Rescue Plan. The total of that is about $150 million. The second piece is the 300 million, which would come from the infrastructure bill. So that's still in process. With that 150 million, the governor formed this main connectivity authority to determine the best use of funding. So, and then there's the Connect Main Authority that gets in about $1 million, $1.5 million per year. That may go up because we now have those funds are a surtax on landline telephones. Over the years, that money has decreased every year. A new plan is that there's now going to be a surtax on cell phones, which means that the Connect Main Authority is going to get $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million per year. So the Connect Main Authority is going to be an arm of the Main Connectivity Authority. It sounds pretty confusing. But what the governor is looking at under the Main Connectivity Authority is that that the money is very well spent. The Connect Main Authority, and I can't imagine the Connectivity Authority is not going to adopt this, but the Connect Main Authority has been working pretty diligently for the last year or two to get the process in place for grant awards. So the way that the grant awards happen now is that there are community broadband projects, which means that your community is actually the applicant to do an infrastructure project. The second set of funds are called line extensions. And what that means is, and we hear this all the time, the cable company comes just to the end of my road and it doesn't come down the street. And so the funding on line extensions would pay for extension of existing broadband networks in a community. So that's what that's the plan that came out of Connect Main. I'm going to venture to guess that the Main Connectivity Authority is going to continue that, but they also might look at places where there needs to be middle mile in order to make it more affordable to get last mile in certain areas. So Mount Desert has fiber that comes down there, so that's great. But in other areas, they might be 20, 30, 40 miles or so from the nearest fiber connection. So the Main Connectivity Authority could look at building middle mile that would make it more affordable for a community or for a provider to build out network.
So when they first came out with what do you call the 3-ring binder?
The 3-ring binder.
And that's basically what, a trunk? That's basically a fiber optic trunk system. Is that right?
That is right. That's right.
So was there ever a plan how that expands out?
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. So the 3-ring binder is 3 rings of fiber across the state. What the plan way back when on main fiber with the 3-ring binder was to do rings within rings so that you'd be able to get that middle mile into communities, closer to communities. So that's what the Main Connectivity Authority is considering. Should they be building out middle mile within the rings of the 3-ring binder? So they'd connect to a 3-ring binder, or even some of the other providers that have been building middle mile, Consolidated, Spectrum. You can purchase wholesale from those providers, but the last mile still needs to be done, and that you need to have an internet service provider that delivers right to the home. Have you have you done, or has there been a community broadband plan that's been done for Mount Desert yet?
Well, years ago, the committee was formed, sort of, we did a lot of surveys of people, who had stuff, who didn't have services. And there was one area of the town in particular that really had nothing. People were using their cell phones as hotspots to access. And so at that point, and that was about 2016.
Yeah.
So the town collaborated with Spectrum and got some outside grant funding as well to extend cable, coaxial cable out towards that part of the town. And so then things kind of quieted down. And in the last year or so, we're trying to bring back, and pre-COVID even, try to get the committee back engaged to say, we need to do more. All businesses are really counting on this, school efforts, et cetera. And then COVID happened.
That was a Connect Me Authority grant, Susan, that we got to work with Spectrum on that. And we ran it to about, I think, 381 households out in that part of town that was virtually unserved. So we really did clean up a good portion of that part of the community, which was the most underserved of all parts of Mount Desert.
And what we have done more recently is sent out a survey to residents all over the town to figure out who has what, are they happy with it, how are they using it, do they have people involved in using it for either work or education purposes, and are they satisfied with it? And so today was actually, we asked people to fill out the surveys by today.
Mm-hmm.
And we have between 200 and 300 surveys back on that. So we have to take a close look at that and see where we stand, what our next will be.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
One of the things that I guess I've learned on this committee is that I believe we have fiber optic that comes onto the island and goes down to Bar Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
We do not seem to have fiber optic that comes down the middle of the island to, say, Soamesville, and that's what comes into the town of Mount Desert, and then comes over to Northeast Harbor and to Seal Harbor and probably back to Otter Creek, which is all part of town of Mount Desert. Soamesville is kind of pretty central because we go out to Pretty Marsh. And so the discussion involved coming down to Soamesville and using that as a hub to branch out to Northeast and then to Pretty Marsh. So my question is that bringing fiber optic down that way, which I believe does not exist yet, would that be considered middle mile?
Yes, that would be considered middle mile because you're bringing the fiber closer to where your residents are. So there's a couple things that I think might be helpful for you. On the Connect Maine website, there is you can apply for community broadband planning. Today and it's about to come out, they're going to announce it, might even tomorrow, we have a meeting tomorrow, that for a phase 1 for a community, you can apply on an ongoing basis, and they're going to award the $5,000, no questions asked. They're going to give you some funding to start doing some of the work you've already been doing. The second is what they call phase 2. And phase 2 means that typically you're going to hire a consultant to help you and to help you to figure out where you do have broadband, where you don't have broadband, what you want for broadband, and what's the gap, and how much is it going to cost to do that, so that you have a plan that you can put out to RFP. In order for you to apply for funding through the Connect Maine Authority or the Maine Connectivity Authority or USDA or any of these other places where there is going to be funding for broadband, you're going to have a very concrete plan, right? And so the first thing is on the Connect Maine website, there is a checklist. You probably have checked off a lot of the things that you need in order to move forward. I would download that checklist and amongst yourself, see if you've met all of the requirements. In order to apply for Connect Maine funding, you have to submit the checklist. Then what most towns do is that they will do an RFP to bring a consultant in for phase 2. If you haven't been working with Island Institute, you're going to want to work with Island Institute. They will help you with this. This is what they do. Kendra Drill Grindle, this is her job now, right? So she's helping communities get to the point where they can apply for funding. If it looks like your community is not eligible for funding because so the Connect Maine Authority, we passed the current speeds that are going to be 100 over 100, but it's 50 over 10 or 50 over 20 is going to be considered unserved. In some of the places where there's cable, they're going to meet that, right? But there's probably a lot of places that don't meet that. So you're going to want to know exactly what everyone has for broadband. The Maine Broadband Coalition has a speed test. One of the things, the surveys are great, but what's better is to get everyone within your community, do a campaign for everyone to do a speed test so that you know exactly where you stand. You have broadband providers that will say to you, oh, we do this and we do that. The speed test can prove otherwise. And it can prove that an area is underserved or unserved. So those are things that you can start to institute now to prepare yourself to apply for funding. And even if you're not going for public funding and you're going to bond on a local level, you still need to have a plan, you need to have a budget, you need to have all of these pieces in order to even bring it to a town meeting. So you're getting closer, but there's going to be a lot of competition for all of these funds that are going to be available, and you've already started the process. You just got to take that next leap.
And thank you for that. We have been working with Kendra Jo.
Great.
She's part of our board on a regular basis. We also have a survey that we've had out for about a month. Kathy, is that right?
Yes, we sent it out at the beginning of July. It went out with the tax bills, so every property owner got one.
That includes a link for a speed test.
Right.
So we, and all that data is actually going into
Vetro.
Yeah.
Vetro, perfect.
So we are part of the second cohort of the Vetro Cares for Maine program.
Fabulous.
And so we did both paper surveys via the tax bills, but we also had worked with Vetro to create an online version for us. And so we're taking those hard copies and putting it on that. So we have a connection. They're GIS mapping system. So we have speed data in the location. And they have done a complete auto design for us. And the town has worked with Brian Lippold of Casco Bay Advisors. They've used him for other projects in the past. So we reached out to him and actually just today got back from him a proposal for doing the work of, the close to the ground review of what it would take to do an RFP.
Great,
so,
great.
Closer.
And this is our third public meeting, right?
Yes,
yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other thing just to remember and to sort of consider, if you've got the cable company, there's Spectrum or
Time Warner.
Yeah, Charter Spectrum. And so you might, one of the options that a community always has is to go to that incumbent provider and say, this is what we want. These are the speeds we want our citizens to have. What's it going to cost us for you to get us there? So that they've already invested in your community. Now, they may not pay for that, but it doesn't mean that you can't pay them to get what you want. So you're not going to own the network. That's the difference between having a municipal network and hiring a provider. Consolidated or Charter are not going to, they're not going to do a public-private partnership. That's not their gig. They're not going to do that. But it doesn't mean that you can't contract with them and say, we want everyone to receive, whatever the speed that you determine, what is it going to cost us to hire you to do that? So know that that's an option, and it's one that you should, even just do some due diligence around that, right? But the first thing you have to determine is, what is it that do you want it to be 100 over 100? That's the Connect Main standard, and I think that's where we're going. That it's symmetrical. Typically, cable companies are not symmetrical. Consolidated is doing some fiber projects, but they do a symmetrical project for you. It's worth having those discussions and having them come back with some pricing for you. So at least you know where exactly you stand with them.
So Susan, along those lines, take a company like Spectrum, who's basically the only game in town. What kind of leverage can we have with them?
Well, the option is that you're going to build a municipal network.
Well, okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now, that said, you got to be careful about that, right? Because they're a big company and they got deep pockets. So they do great things like offer really low rates, right, for a period of time. I mean, we've seen that mostly when you sign up with Spectrum, you get this, great prices, right. And then a year later it goes sky high, right? Yeah. So one of the issues is that when there's an incumbent provider, you run a risk that your citizens are going to say, oh no, I have a better deal with Spectrum or Consolidated than what by paying for a fiber project. Islesboro, their model's a little bit different. So what they did is they wanted to ensure that every single home on the island was going to be connected. And so they did it as part of the tax base. So the actual monthly bill that the Islesboro residents pay for their broadband is about $30 a month. It's being subsidized by the town for the remainder of it. And then what that did, that ensured that everybody was going to take that connection. So it's just something, as you're thinking about this, what's the carrot you're going to dangle to everyone in your community, that because take rate matters, right? And go back to that slide I had of 75% take rate. Take rate matters because that's the return on investment when you're investing in a network. So the more, and for any network that's being built, whether it's going to be a community-based fiber network or whether it's Spectrum or Consolidated, they have to have so many homes per mile in order to meet that return on investment. So that's and that's what happens with take rate, right? It's not affordable, or whatever the other issues. You have competition going on. You need to make sure that you're going to get enough subscribers to support what you're paying for that network. You don't want to build a network and then Spectrum comes in and says, oh, we're going to give it to everybody for $19.99 a month.
So Susan, from the digital equity standpoint, do you think that we would be in a better position to provide more equitable access or subsidized costs if it was a municipally owned network?
I think in your case, it's probably a really good plan, because you have a strong cable company. They don't want to lose any customers. They've invested, right? So if you're looking at building a network, your own network, then you're going to want to make it so that it is affordable for everyone and attractive for your residents to say, oh, this is a great idea, right? This is what I want to do. Sometimes, so one of the classes that we do is called Cutting the Cord, because if you've got a good internet connection, you can get rid of cable television and satellite TV. You can join things like YouTube TV or Hulu or any of the other streaming services. And so when you're doing this, if you put a list of how much does it cost to have your connection today for your TV, your phone, your internet, and then, let's just say your fiber connection, you're going to build a fiber network, and the fiber connection is going to cost $60 a month, but you're saving because you don't have to pay $100 and some odd dollars for your TV. You can get less for your TV, but you're going to have to spell that out really clearly for your residents so that they understand that, and that they know that there's a value in dumping their cable television.
Have you seen any towns somehow come up with a scheme where the town can give help to low-income community members for incumbent service? So let's say we stuck with Spectrum. Is there some sort of scheme, like a tax credit or something, that you could help them afford the Spectrum service? Or really, if we want to go down this avenue of trying to reduce the price or trying to have a program for low-income community members, that it would kind of need more leverage through a municipal network?
Yeah, so you probably, what you're going to want to look for, and Brian, if you hire Brian, he's going to ask about this. It's the agreement that the town has, and what is it that Spectrum is doing for the town? Are they giving you back money? What's going on with that money? What are they using it for? Does it need, is it outdated? Can you negotiate, right? Because that's the best thing. If it's outdated and you can negotiate, then you can take that money and use it for affordability. Now, that said, Spectrum also has an affordability piece for low to moderate income and families. And so, you want to take advantage of that anyway. One of the issues, though, is that they can't, in order to qualify, they can't have any back bills, which is an issue sometimes. And they need to not be a current subscriber, which is a problem because they're eligible for the low income, the lower rate, but they can't get it because they have to be a new subscriber. But I think that's negotiating with the cable company. Don't underestimate your power as a community to negotiate and say, we don't like those terms, we want to talk about it. I think we sort of back off because they're a big cable company, but they don't want to lose your business either. And they're a little nervous right across the whole state and across the country of these municipal networks that are being built.
And they are going to have trouble with like a symmetrical 100-100 connection.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any insight as to why that became the standard that Connect Maine is using? Why that's important for Connect Maine?
So Connect Maine decided to this was a very bold step for Connect Maine to take. We said there's all of this funding that's coming in, that it is a once in a lifetime opportunity to do it right. And what the state didn't want to do was to spend money on antiquated networks. If I had a crystal ball, what I would tell you is that the internet of the future is either going to be fiber, or it's going to be high capacity licensed fixed wireless, mostly for bridging to get from point A to point B. Cranberries is a good example of that. There's a tower on Cranberry, tower on Little Cranberry, and it's wireless link between the two islands, and then it's fiber on both islands. So that's a good use of when you're trying to get the distance, and it doesn't make sense to actually run, well, in an island situation, you can't run the cable. So it's your only choice. In the cable world, what I think is going to happen, it's going to be all about content. So if you think of, YouTube TV and Hulu and Netflix and all of that, I have my television are smart TVs, right? With an internet connection, I can get on Spectrum or Xfinity with the app on that smart TV. I don't need a box, right? And so when you think about that and think into the future, you should be able to get a subscription to Spectrum or Xfinity, regardless of where you live and regardless of whether they're the ones that are delivering the internet service to you.
Sure. And can I add something? One of the things in your question, Pete, was why did they decide 100 over 100? Technically, the reason for that is they have fiber optic to the house, and then within the house, they have copper. The copper slows it down. So if you have fiber optic within the house, now you're talking 1,000 over 1,000. That's the fiber optic is a game changer.
It is a game changer. And when you think about what happened during the pandemic, you know, you have a consolidated of a 15 over 2, or even a spectrum of 100 over 20. When you had 5 people in the household, 3 kids on trying to do remote school, 2 parents working, video conferencing all day long for all those people, the systems crashed. It couldn't support it. You needed to have that upload speed in order to support all the video conferencing that was going on.
Yep.
Susan, have you found that as far as digital literacy and loaning programs and mentoring people on how to use different systems, and admittedly, none of us knew how to we never used Zoom before pandemic, you know, so you're right. There's always going to be something new coming along. We're always going to have to do this. Do you find that it is sometimes the municipalities that are doing that, or is it nonprofits within the municipalities, either the local libraries, the school systems, or other groups like yours that are filling those needs? Or do towns, are they really creating, you know, the staff and the resources to manage that?
No, I mean, we're partnering with dozens and dozens of organizations, municipalities, nonprofits of every single spectrum that are partnering with us to deliver those free classes. Even in the adult ed world, adult ed programs, their funding is so hard, right? Because they have to have local match. It's not enough funding. They've got to do the core subjects. They don't have money to do digital literacy. So we partner with a lot of adult eds to deliver digital literacy to those adult ed programs. I think that it's important to remember that the digital literacy piece can be a driver on, you know, to get your community on board with infrastructure. You know, classes like cutting the cord, for that, it's a great way for people to understand what they can do with an internet connection. Or we have a class on apps for healthcare, the things that you can do to monitor your healthcare and to work with your providers. So it's beyond just even, you know, learning how to use, you know, Microsoft Word and Excel and QuickBooks, sort of the business type. There's also what happens within the family, right? What happens at home, that increasing your use of internet can make an impact in a household. Smart homes is a good example of that. You know, my house it's smarter than me, right? So I can monitor my thermostats, I can set my alarm, I've got cameras, but I need robust internet in order to do that, right? And so it's a pitch. I mean, that's your marketing, right? Of trying to get everyone on board to agree that we want to move forward with better broadband for our community. Those digital literacy classes can help you get there, because it's teaching people what they can do with a connection. If you think of infrastructure as the how are we going to get everyone connected? Digital inclusion and digital equity is the why. Why is this important?
And it's also the how you get there, because you have to bring
How you
people,
get there.
everybody gets a vote on how we're going to spend our town's money.
Exactly. Yep.
Interesting.
You know, I hear it, you know, you sort of don't underestimate what you're talking about is a political campaign, right? You want everybody to be thinking the same way you do, and you got to figure out different ways to get them to that point, right? And you know, and you're always going to have the town members who say, absolutely not, we're not spending any money. We're not going to do it. We're doing just fine. Spectrum's been fine. Consolidated's been fine. I can get on the internet. Why do we need to have better internet? You got to convince them why they need better internet.
Mhm. Yes. And so far, what I have seen of the results of our surveys is not a lot of people have fiber, but a lot of people are happy enough with their services. So I think that there's also a movement around here for environmental concerns. And if we all had smart homes, so we were using less electricity, that might be a way to, bring in more people that way as well. So
You also have a high tourism industry, right? And so having better internet so that people who have homes that want to monitor them during the winter months when they're not there is a pitch for better broadband, right?
Mhm.
And so you got to come at it from so many different angles. I
Mhm.
think the pandemic is crazy, but it's like the collateral benefit of the pandemic is that people get it, right? They understood if they couldn't if they were getting knocked off because they didn't have good broadband, now they want better broadband. They're understanding it much, much better.
And I think almost every service you go for, even for, retirees, just signing up for Social Security, you got to go online to do it.
You got to go
And
online. Exactly. And, for as a municipality, in Jonesport, if I have to still send a check in to pay my taxes, to register my car, where it really should be an online process where I can go on and say, okay, I'm registering, here's my money. That's money in the bank for that for that municipality. They're not waiting for it. Same thing with, taxes that are being paid. So there's a lot of benefit for communities, but they're for municipalities, but many of them are not there yet.
Well, I think too that we're going to see that right now probably that the percent, and this will just continue to increase, that the percentage of digital natives are outpacing the digital immigrants. And I think that's just going to continue to flow that way as people get older and they just have been brought up in an environment with in a digital environment.
One of the things that we have 3 course curriculums. One is for business and in the workforce, so all the workforce development skills. Then we have for home and education. So we did a lot of classes around for parents on how to use Google Meet, Google Classroom so that they could help their kiddos. And then the third is aging well with technology. And so one of the things that we're looking at in the outcome measurement of the work we're doing is, can people stay home in their homes longer with the use of technology? So on our website, there's a blog called Susan's Corner. And in there, I talk about she's now 99-year-old aunt, who we got on Facebook when she was in her 70s. And when the pandemic hit, she was on Facebook all the time because that was how she was connecting with her very, very big Italian family. She then started reading over on her iPad. She was reading stories to her great-great-granddaughter. If we had started her on technology in her 90s, it wouldn't have been, it would likely not have been as successful. But because she was in her 70s, while her mind was still sharp, it became habit for her. And so she stays very engaged with her entire family through Facebook, through emails, through video conferencing. It was a game changer for her during the pandemic. So, that's where sort of the benefits come for our older adults. Can we get them connected while they're able to, and their minds are sharp enough to be able to learn a new skill? That said, 8% of our students are 80 years old and older. So
You live longer, actually.
agree. Many of them we have a class on accessing the digital library so they can download books and
Telemedicine.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I'd like to ask something else, different kind of question. In your experience with Axiom Technologies and putting fiber optic on the poles. I guess it's Consolidated that owns the telephone poles. And Spectrum has to make a deal with them to put their fiber optic on their poles as well. So we would be doing that. What was your experience with your local phone provider and stringing fiber optic?
So telephone poles are owned by electric companies, cable companies, and telephone companies. So when it's the unknown cost when you are putting a budget together. The term is called make ready. And make ready means that somebody is going out to the polls to see where all those lines are, whether they're because the electric company has a certain space on those poles, as do, and then comes the telephone companies, cable companies, any other fiber that might be there. And so when the unknown costs, and they'll estimate it when they give you a price for putting in fiber to your community, they're going to give you a ballpark of what make ready is, but they're not going to know that until they actually go out and look at those poles and send the applications in. And then whoever owns the poles has to then determine whether you can just run fiber, or do they have to move some of the positions of the existing cables that are on it, or do they have to put a second pole up beside it? So it's one of the things that they cannot get you a firm number when they're telling you, when the consultant gives you a price to put fiber to every home in your community, that's the line item that's subject to change. And they'll tell you that because they don't know until they actually send those applications in what it's going to cost to actually get your to put your cable in the position with the other cables that are on those poles.
Because
I also think
the owner changes. So like down the street, could Spectrum own one pole and then Amera owns another pole?
They could, but they all go into the telephone company, and then the telephone company, they figure it out amongst them. So, the poles are shared by many different entities. So the applications go into Consolidated. It's an issue because they ran into this. We had some funding to put fiber projects around the state. They're called the Connect the Kids program through the Connect Maine Authority. And some of those projects just got stuck because Consolidated wasn't moving fast enough to get and because they've got to reach out to the other providers too. They weren't moving fast enough to let the broadband providers know that they could in fact what it was going to cost to actually attach to that pole. The other thing that happens is that then you are paying for those pole attachments. That's an annual fee. So what Cranberry did, they decided they didn't want to pay the telephone company or anybody else for the pole attachment fee. So they put up monopoles around the island because they had the right of way. They owned the right of ways. And so they said, we're not going on your poles. We're going to build our own. And when they looked at that over a period of 20 years, there was a significant cost savings by not doing make ready and by not putting poles up, not attaching to existing poles because they'd have to pay annual fees for that. So it was a brilliant move to do that. But they owned the right of way. It's an island. They also did some cabling on the ground where it didn't make sense to put poles up. So it was a very creative. Cranberry was very, very creative.
Am I to understand from our last guest that Maine is considering somehow creating a utility, whatever, to take over all the poles, or?
Well, that's CMP, there's a bill, or there's a movement that the telephone companies would be owned by the state, but they're not anywhere close to that. I mean, that basically means that the state would own the electric companies. Yeah, they're not there yet though. And I don't know if they're
But we
gonna
have to deal with that. Yeah.
Yeah. You
One
wanna-
way
I
it
guess
is.
this kind
Fossil
of goes
fuel
in,
trees, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess
So-
that goes in with the the what do you call it, the take rate, which is
Mhm.
like, okay, so we're gonna have an ongoing cost of paying for the pole access. I was curious if, given a healthy take rate, have you seen any towns actually make this into a new source of revenue? So like, what's the number, how many years until it pays for itself? And then does it become a new source of income for the town?
So I don't know whether you've had any conversation with Mark Ouellette, who's now the CEO and president of Axiom, but all of his projects, fiber projects, are public-private partnerships. He's the only company that's doing it in the state. And so what happens is that a percentage of the revenue, so he's collecting subscription fees on a monthly basis from the subscribers. A percentage of that goes back to the town on an annual basis. That money can go towards paying on a bond, or it can go into a sort of a slush fund that they could use for things like affordability or maybe broadband expansion or whatever they want to do with it. But that's a true public-private partnership where money is going back to the community based on those subscription fees. But he's the only one that's doing that in the
But
state.
Susan, isn't, this is Lily Pugh, isn't GWI doing that in a variety of different areas?
I'm not aware that they're doing, that they're giving money back to the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
The project up in Baileyville, it's a municipal build out of the network, but it's dark fiber, open access, so anybody can do it, but there's only one company that does it. And the town or the network collects a small percentage of whatever, they have licensing fees per subscriber, right? I think it's Pioneer is the broadband provider.
You're right. So there are some municipal basically what a community did in Baileyville, Calais is they made it a utility. So it's owned by the utility company. And then they've contracted with Pioneer to operate the network. They contracted with them to build and to operate. And so in that case, the provider is just getting their fee. The money though is going to the utility, right? And then the utility company is paying for the operation of the operator of the network. So we're seeing Millinocket is looking at that as a model too. It can work. It's not the answer for every community, and I think every community has to decide what is the best model for them, right? And I think that you get that through the due diligence of those community broadband plans of what is it, what's our options, what does it mean, what's the pros and cons if we go this way versus another way.
Mhm. Good. Lily, you had your hand up earlier. Did you have another question?
Sorry about that. No, I was going to actually just make a comment about the pole attachments, because it seems that when I've had some real estate clients that have wanted to go down their own independent fiber route, that Consolidated has up to 90 days to even acknowledge a pole lease request. And that's just crazy. And you saw all along Route 3 with all the new telephone poles that have gone all along Route 3 going from the head of the island all the way to Bar Harbor. And I think that was municipally driven. And they put all the brand new poles in because there was not enough room to basically distance between each of the wires. And there's a very specific formula of distance that you have to have between the wires in order to be able to even be considered to attach to a pole. So in many times, the telephone company's saying, sorry, you have no room. You're going to need to put a brand new pole, and you pay for the entire pole installation. And that just adds but I guess and you may, I had to take a call earlier, you may have answered this, but you know, it seems like there's many different towns and many different groups that are out there looking at how do you get to make ready and what's the distance on the poles and things. Is there any entity in Maine that is the basically the source, the central clearinghouse for pole data? I mean, it seems like we're all doing this, and you know, the 2013, you know, we did all of the different poll surveys back with Tilson, you know, in order to do our earlier project, and it just seems like everyone is doing this every couple of years. Well, I mean, life hasn't changed that dramatically with the telephone polls between 2013 and today. So, you know, is there any entity that basically has the most accurate poll data in the state?
No, but it's one of the discussions that has come up on how to, you know, and I think that we may see some discussion. I think we'll see some discussion on it from the Maine Connectivity Authority, because make ready is a huge issue. And it's the phone company that has total control over that, right? And so that's where you get the 90-day waiting, and then, you know, who they might have done make ready for another entity that's come in, and now they've got to repeat it all over again. So there is some discussion about a way to streamline the process, and that should connect Maine, or Maine Connectivity Authority, should they invest some money in developing a better system for make ready. So your point is it's been discussed, because it slows the project down and it increases the cost of the project substantially. So, you know, it's hard, you know, it's hard to get an accurate of what exactly it's going to cost to put fiber in a community until that make ready is done and you've got the results back.
Well, and the other whole side of that, you know, and I'm not going down a rabbit hole away from broadband, but with the number of major storms that this state has had in recent years and is likely to face, you know, having an up-to-date inventory of every single telephone pole that exists in the state and what's on that, you would think that someone would in the utility commission would be looking at that bigger picture, because when we have bad ice storms and we all lose power, somebody has to know what pole, what's on that pole, and how quickly can we get it attached. So, you know, beyond our you know, broadband question, it's likely that somebody has a lot of that information that they're just not willingly sharing. And forgive me for being that direct. So.
Lily, I think that it's really interesting, because it's kind of, that might be something for College of the Atlantic in their GIS.
Yeah.
I also know that all the poles here that are owned by Emera are numbered. You go to the pole physically itself, it has a number. And I know the 3 poles outside leading to my property are sequential in number.
Right. But
So
Frank, the interesting thing about Emera's poles is that there's more Emera's poles going to private homes than there are along the main thoroughfare. The main thoroughfare, a lot of those poles are owned by Consolidated or Fairpoint or whatever.
But for example, coming into my place, the Emera poles are numbered, and then there are my poles that are not numbered. So I have 2 of those coming in. So they, and mine, I'm near the water company, so it kind of, they use it. And so a lot of the poles going into private residences are not numbered, is what I'm saying.
But just back to what Susan was saying is that, you know, I mean, this is the 3rd broadband project that I've worked on since I moved here in 2001. And every single one of them comes to a screeching halt because of poles, every single one of them. And, you know, and it's like, okay, well, then you find that out at the end of the game. Well, we all know it at the beginning of this process. So let's figure out a way to work on the poles before we actually get to the other stuff, because without the poles, we're dead in the water.
And you're right about the storms situation and poles getting knocked down. Look at the Hurricane Ida and what happened in New Orleans. All those poles are all down. It's going to take weeks. Could we
Well,
use an excuse of emergency preparation and expected hurricanes in the future as an excuse to figure out where are the poles? What are they
Exactly.
numbers?
You're looking for leverage. That's a leverage point that nobody's
Exactly.
used to date.
Yes, yeah. And Vetro has a lot of that information. I can't believe, because they've done so much of this. They're collecting it, but it might be proprietary because they're doing it for private firms or consultants or whatever. But I think you're right, the data is there. So
Lily, could you repeat that, the what you just said about the leverage?
What I just said is that if you're looking for potential points of leverage, to be able to have projects go forward, the only leverage that anyone has ever talked about is gosh, our kids can't go, can't attend classes online. It's all about the school kids. Well, it's now beyond school kids. It's about larger scale economic development and climate change and storm impact with, losing when we have ice storms or hurricanes and things of that sort. If you can use, the potential of loss of power and loss of those poles because of storm damage as a means of being able to have the pole data be more accurate. Somebody has the pole data because they know about it because of how quickly power outages are repaired when you have broken poles. So it's all out there, but it's just nobody's claiming that they're the central clearinghouse for it. Does that answer your question?
And that might be a really good question for Vetro.
Right. Well, we're guess we've been a little over an hour, and we do try to wrap these up. Kathy, is there anything else you wanted to cover? I just have found this extremely informational, and I appreciate Susan coming to us this evening.
I knew she'd be great. So
Yeah.
Thank you, Sue. No, I don't have anything else. I think we had a series of questions and I think you've answered them all. So want to thank you very much.
Well, my pleasure. I've just put in my contact information and our website, and please feel free to reach out to me at any time. This is what I do all day, every day. So happy to help you in any way I can.
Well, it's been awesome. It's been great. Thank you very much. And
go.
thank you for everyone else for being on here this evening. And I think I'm just really feeling like we're making some progress. And it sounds like we're ready to have a consultant, right, Kathy? And
yes, we have a proposal. We haven't opened it yet, but it just came in today by email. I'll share that with the committee tomorrow. And it'll be on our agenda for the next meeting. So
awesome.
Thanks all.
All right.
Good job.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much,
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Really good. Excellent.
Thanks, Frank. Take
Right.
care. Bye. Are you sure you want to stop recording to the cloud? Yes.